So in today's discussion, we'll talk about the recent updates to Microsoft Endpoint DLP. Especially, we'll talk about few features where we have rolled out in the recent few months, in the upcoming or in the last few months. I'm your speaker, Arun, from the EDLP product management team. I also have Aakash, who's my colleague PM from the same team. In today's agenda, we'll cover a whole suite of features, right, starting from advanced classification, scanning, and protection for endpoints running on macOS. And we'll talk about the heterogeneous environment or the multi-cloud support, where we are rolled out for network file shares and VDI for endpoint DLP. And finally, we'll touch on one of the most important features where there is most restrictive action being rolled out across the suite of features. So if you have questions, please feel free to put it on the chat. We'll of course have a dedicated Q&A session during the last 15 minutes of the call. Having said that, let me move on to the first feature where we took a deep dive into advanced classification, scanning, and protection for endpoints running on macOS. So as a lot of people might know, with Endpoint DLP, with Microsoft Endpoint DLP, we are already supporting Mac endpoints, and we are already supporting endpoints running on Windows, be it on Windows 11, 10, and other OSs, right? So this is a critical feature. Some of you might know there is advanced classification, scanning, and protection, which is a cloud-based classification service from Microsoft that allows you to scan items, classify them, and then return results so that it's being used for other features like DLP and MIP. The support for advanced classification is already available on Windows, and we are extending to Mac endpoints as well. So we are supporting file types for typically Office file types with starting with Word, Excel, PPT, and extending to support text, JSON, and RTF file types. So advantages with this feature, you get a whole suite of advanced classification flow with features such as fingerprinting, EDM, ML trainable classifiers, named entities, etc., which you can use in your DLP policies now scope to Mac endpoints. And you also have globalization support for Mac endpoints, which means languages such as Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And the content in these supported languages are now going to be supported with the advanced classification turned on in your tenant. There's a bit of caveat or a pre-requirements here. You need to have your Mac endpoints onboarded to DLP, either using JAMF Connect or Intune, which I'm sure you will. And you have the below mentioned OS versions that are required for this feature to be supported, be it Mac OS Catalina 10.1.15 and above, and you need your minimum OS builds that need to support, which is 100.69.25. So I'll provide a step-by-step walkthrough. So all you need to do is you have an endpoint DLP settings page as part of your SEC portal or the security and compliance portal. So all you need to go to this endpoint DLP settings page, and you have an advanced classification, scanning, and protection. As you see on the screen, you just need to turn on this toggle that will extend this feature to both Windows and Mac endpoints. Specifically, it will extend or leverage it to your Mac endpoints as well, and you don't need any other additional setting. So this is the walkthrough of this particular feature. I'm sure you will try it out, and we will move on to the next feature in this cycle, which is endpoint DLP support for network file shares. As a lot of you might know, with Microsoft Endpoint DLP, we were supporting files that are available in your local disks, which typically endpoints, let's say, running on your laptops, workstations, etc. You have a lot of C drives, D drives, disk drives, which we call, and Microsoft Endpoint DLP is already supported on these device drives, as you might know. And with this feature, we are taking a very important step towards a multi-cloud or multi-environment strategy, and where we are extending support to network file shares, which are remote network file shares and MapNet drives. We understand that a lot of customers like you have data across, your digital data estate is expanding, especially you have a lot of data across different platforms, different clouds, and be it with network file shares as well. And we are taking this important step to address your need. So here is a scenario, what I'm trying to show here. So there, as part of settings, all you need to do, go and just enable network file share, which is part of endpoint DLP settings. That is the first step. So here I'm going to walk you through a few scenarios how an information worker is getting accessed from an endpoint from a network file share and how EDLP is preventing that access. So for example, here in scenario one, you see a customer is trying to access a network share, which is an information worker is trying to copy a file from a network share and trying to upload it to a cloud, which is OneDrive.com. And EDLP is seen in action where you have a pop-up from the Microsoft Edge. Edge is the browser being used here, which is an notification saying that your egress gets blocked. So here is a Purview data loss prevention widget that or a pop-up notification saying that hey, your action is getting blocked as per the policy definition. So as an admin, you can continue to set policies accordingly, allow block and block with override. Again, I'm showing here a scenario where there is a sensitive file which is trying to get egressed out of network share to a cloud and it's getting blocked. So here's an information worker experience. Next, I will also reach to a slide where I'll talk about the Activity Explorer event and the incident alert. So here is the same event where you find, especially the Activity Explorer event having the egress operation here. The information worker is trying to copy to or upload to a cloud, right? You can find that as the one which is ticked there. And you also have details more on this Activity Explorer, like you have the parent, which says the location from where the file was trying to access, and that's going to be your network share location in this path, right? So that's on Activity Explorer event, and then there is also an incident alert that's predominantly used for triage purposes. So here is a rule match where an admin has set a particular policy saying that whenever something is going to be egressed from a network share, there should be a particular rule, and that particular incident rule, the rule match is also reflected in the incident alert console, GAR console, which admins can use to triage it based on their needs. Then I'll move on to another scenario where I'm trying to copy a file from one network share, which is on the source of a network share, to another network share, which is another destination location, which I'm trying to do a copy, right? So here I'm trying to copy from network share A to a network share B, source to destination. Both are going to be network shares. So I'm accessing an information worker as seen in the screenshot is trying to access a network share, a file with SSNs as you can see, and trying to copy to another network share, and it doesn't allow me to do that action. There is a pop-up. In this case, you can see an MS Defender pop-up or a notification coming from Defender saying that here is an SSN notification along with the rule. Of course, I've customized it for this demo. You can choose to customize the MS Defender notifications as appropriate for the information workers. So this is scenario 2. Of course, we also have another alert, which is again used for triaging here. You can see an activity with file copy to a network share, and you can use this incident alert to triage it as appropriate. So we touched upon network file shares, which is part of your today's digital estate. I'm sure a lot of sensitive data and the data which you choose across your environments have to be protected. And with this, we are also extending support to VDIs, which is virtualized environments. We are extending support to a few or the major VDI platforms as part of this feature preview, namely starting with Citrix, Amazon Workspaces, Azure Virtual Desktop, Hyper-V, and we are also going to support a lot of OSs, right from Server 2019, Server 2022 OS, Windows 10 multi-session, 11 multi-session, along with the single session OSs, which we already support today. So please note that you can continue to onboard your virtualized environments via any of the supported methods that we already have today for Endpoint DLP. So you have a range of DLP onboarding methods right from Intune, configuration manager, scripts, etc. We will continue to support that, and you can use the same for onboarding your VMs to Endpoint DLP using any of our supported onboarding methods which we have today. You can refer to the links which is already also shared there in the appendix of this presentation, which will be shared. You can refer for your own purposes. So we'll talk about a few scenarios on how virtualized environments are getting probably with DLP getting enforced on these virtualized environments. So one, we find an information worker. In this scenario, you can find an information worker who's accessing a Citrix VM. It's a Citrix workspace, as you can see on screen, which has Windows 11 OS, which is this Windows 11 21H2 single session OS, which is one of the combinations which we support. And this VM is already, given that it's already onboarded to Microsoft Endpoint DLP, we will show how DLP is getting enforced here. So this is a browser. An information worker is going to access Citrix workspaces and going to access a particular VM on this via browser with Windows 11 single session OS running on. And here you can find within the VM, right? There is going to be a lot of sensitive files, I'm sure. And here is a file with a lot of IP addresses that you can see on the screen. And the information worker is trying to do a print operation on this particular file, which is getting blocked. So this is the scenario one where a DLP is getting an action in Citrix on one particular OS, which we have seen that the egress is getting prevented. And then there is a scenario two where we are talking about how an information worker is also accessing another virtual environment, which is going to be from Microsoft, from our family, which is Azure Virtual Desktop. A lot of people may know. And an information worker is trying to access an Azure Virtual Desktop VM, which is already running on Windows 10 multi-session OS, which is another OS we have from Microsoft family, where you can have a lot of users using the same OS, probably isolated sessions, what we meant, which is, let's consider that this VM is already onboarded to Microsoft Endpoint DLP, and you have an AVD multi-session, which is, as you see, I'm accessing this via browser. I have the AVD multi-session OS setup, and with this, I'm also trying to do the same operation, which I'm going to try and access the sensitive file, which has a lot of IP addresses, and I have a policy definition saying that this egress has to be blocked. And there you go, you see Microsoft Endpoint DLP in action, which is in a way blocking this printing operation and not allowing the egress to go as per the policy definition. These are two scenarios, and the final scenario is something which is something we support on the server side of things. This is the first time we are bringing support for Windows Server or the server OSs, as a lot of people might know. So there is an Amazon Workspaces environment here, which is Win 10 experience over Server 2019. The base OS is going to be Server 2019, which is going to be the predominant client OS where ADLP is going to be supported here, though it's called as Win 10 experience over Server 2019. So here an information worker is again trying to access a Windows Amazon Workspaces VM, which is running on a Windows OS. Here it's Windows 10 experience over Server 2019, and the base OS is going to be Server 2019. And the user logs into an Amazon Workspaces console, which is an app, as you can see, and there is in this particular VM, the information worker is trying to access again the sensitive file with IP addresses, which should be locked as per the policy definitions, and the information worker is trying to copy these IP addresses in this definition, as you can see, and not going to print it, and the copy operation gets blocked. So here is the a case where we have seen all three scenarios, right from Citrix workspaces with Windows 11 single session to Amazon workspaces with Windows Server 2019. A whole suite of VDI platforms which we are supporting and across OSs is something that I'd like to call out. Before handing over to Aakash, there are, just to give a recap on these two features, for network file shares, all you need to do is go to Endpoint DLP settings and enable network file shares toggle, which an option which you will find on your as part of your Endpoint DLP settings page within this SEC portal. And you can also choose to have a lot of network shares exclusions. So that is a flexibility that we offer to customers. You can define them. You can, like, let's say you have a lot of exclusions that you need to bring, or you want to be excluded from your DLP monitoring activities. You can continue to go and define network path exclusions, similar to file path exclusions, and they will be excluded from Microsoft Endpoint DLP monitoring activities. So that's a flexibility that we offer. Just a recap on network file shares. And we also support mapped network drives, which means if you have, let's say, a Z drive or a Y drive, if an information worker is mapping an internal drive to a network share internally on an endpoint, we will continue to identify that, whatever drive names, Z drive, Y drive, I'm just taking these names for example purposes, and it's going to be mapped to a WAC network share location 1. It's going to be treated as a network share, and it will continue uh, uh, to enforce DLP for files that are classified on network shares. Just a caveat here, please note we don't support old files. With Microsoft DLP today, we support data that is for files that are classified already, which means an operation on that file will help you to, such as a file read or write or even like a print, will classify the file so that enforcement kicks in with Microsoft Endpoint DLP. So having said that, I'll also go on to a kind of a repeat or a kind of a summary on VDI support for virtualized environments. So we support, with this feature, we have rolled out support for Microsoft Endpoint DLP and announcing support across 3 different platforms, starting with Citrix, Azure Virtual Desktop, and Amazon Workspaces across OSs, Windows 10, 11, single session, multi-session, and server OSs. Having said that, I'll hand it over to Aakash, who's my colleague PM on the most restricted rule for endpoint.
Hey, thanks, Arun. Okay, so this one is a behavior change rather than a net new feature. Next slide, Arun. Specific to how Endpoint DLP deals with files which have or which match multiple rules at a time. So today, or previously, when multiple rules matched a file, Endpoint DLP would take the highest priority rule and only enforce that rule, as well as generate alert for that rule. This created certain gaps in protection based on how your policies were structured. For example, let's take the scenario where you have 2 policies looking for different classifiers and having different actions. The first policy is looking for credit card number and blocks print. The second policy is looking for social security number and blocks copy to USB. Now, when previously the behavior was that if a file had both credit card number and social security number, it would match both the policies, but Endpoint DLP would apply only policy 1, which meant that print was blocked, but copy to USB would still be allowed. You can click once. Now, with the change that we are making, Endpoint DLP is going to honor all matching policies and apply the most restrictive action across the channels. The expectation in this case would be that both print and USB is blocked to ensure the protection. Okay, let's go to next slide and see how it would work in with the new behavior. So in this example, I have 3 policies. First 2 policies are looking for credit card number. The first one blocks print, the second one blocks USB, and the third policy looking for SSN blocks clipboard. In the previous scenario or the previous behavior, as we saw, only policy 1 would be applied and only print would be blocked. With the change that we have made, all 3 policies will be applied on the file, and the resulting action would be that print will be blocked, USB will be blocked, and copy to clipboard will also be blocked. And corresponding to these 3 policies, you will see alerts generated in the compliance center. Okay, we can take questions at the end.
Yeah,
I think that's
thanks for that. The team's been good with answering questions. We do have a couple that are worth reiterating. The first one is, when I enable advanced classification, scanning, and protection, what will the impact be? Will it take actions on user activity, or will we be able to tell it to only audit users' activities?
Yeah. So as I mentioned on the chat as well, once you enable advanced classifier scanning, all your Office PDF and supported file types that Arun shared will be classified or will also use advanced tech like fingerprint ML, exact data match, among others. And based on this, you can apply your policies, which will restrict user actions, or you can simply use it to audit user activities, depending on your scenario.
Great, thank you. We had a question just come in. Is the most restrictive rule something that we can customize and turn on and off, or is it automatically applied and always on?
So this is the default behavior now. It cannot be turned off because it is essentially enforcing multiple policies together. But you can choose to structure your policies in a way that at a time only single policy matches and the most restrictive action is part of that policy.
Great, thank you. The next question is, for network share coverage and exclusions, does this cover all network shares, or are we able to customize and specify specific file shares and folders within those file shares to monitor?
Yeah, Arun, you want to take that?
Yes, sure, Aakash. So we don't have, so we just have an option where you can just turn on the feature as part of Endpoint DLP settings. What you can do is you can include exclusions, which means you can specify exclusions that you want to be excluded from EDLP monitoring activities. That is which we support currently as part of the feature. We don't have an option to just, to whitelist or add specific network shares where you want this to be supported. However, we support, as part of the current support, we just include exclusions which you can bring into the feature.
Great, thank you. That seems to be all the questions we've got. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Arun and Aakash, for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.